All right, we're recording, and I'm with Alicia McCalla, the fantastic, the wonderful, the amazing Alicia McCalla.
Oh my goodness.
You were the first guest on the podcast.
Was I?
You were.
That is fantastic.
Episode 2, you were the
Yes.
first guest. Yeah, and episode 1 doesn't count because that was just me like jibber jabbing about what the podcast might be someday, but you were the very first guest on the podcast.
That is perfect, Jeff. I like listening to you. You always have some incredible insights.
Super untrue. So tell us before we get into your work, because I know we're actually here just to look at your amazing piece, which I loved. Before we get into your work, tell everybody a little bit about where they can find you and what you're doing.
Okay. My website is www.aliciamccalla.com. And I generally write kick-ass Black women heroines in science fiction and fantasy. And the project that I'm working on with you is for Jay Thorne and Zach Bohannon's Witches of Salem project. I went there for a world building event in July in Boston, and that was so much fun. And we learned all about witches. And so I decided that I wanted to use that as a learning tree for me. So you guys were talking about doing the voice modulation and characterization. And I had been trying to learn a lot more about serial fiction. So I know one of my Achilles heels is dialogue, and serial fiction is primarily dialogue. Mm-hmm. And so you got a chance to help me out by taking a look at this story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And helping me to learn more about characterization, dialogue. And I feel like Jeff has other things that he was like, no, Alicia, you need to fix this. I was like, okay.
Got a list. I got a whole list that we're going to talk about.
I'm okay with that. And I confess, I sent you like a really rough alpha draft. And I do want to say this too. I usually have 2 alpha readers read for me, my cousin and my sorority sister. And my cousin was like, oh, it was actually really good. I liked it. And my sorority sister was a dude. She did not finish it. She was like, what is this, right? But they both agreed. They hated the hell out of Melody. It was like, we hate her.
That's funny. That's really funny. That's great. Yeah. So let me ask you, we can go about this a couple ways. We can go like big to small, where we talk like whole piece and structure and all of that, and then get into the details. Or we can just go piece by piece. What's going to be better for you?
You know what? I like big to small.
Okay.
But if you think piece to piece works, that's cool too.
No, I can go either way. Okay. Let's do big to small. So tell me how you want a reader to feel when they read the piece. Talk to me about the emotional experience.
Well, I'll start with my sorority sister. She said she didn't think my Fury Reaper was angry and violent enough. She was like, she needed to be a lot more angst. But when I started it, I was looking at serial fiction and how to write it. And one of the things that they said was that your serial fiction hero or heroine needed to be like the every person or the everyday person. So I was kind of approaching it as if this is an enraged Black woman for a variety of different reasons, but that in the end, she needed to deal with her rage and have a form of healing and reconciliation with that.
So
I think that's the arc.
Mm-hmm. By the end of the piece, you want to get to healing and reconciliation.
Yes.
And you want to start rage.
Yes.
Okay.
And I definitely feel like this piece has the opportunity to go on to be a larger story or serial. So
Yeah, you're
I can
definitely
see
just
that.
starting something, which is great. Like, I think serial fiction is great for that, to be like, okay, we're going to start a journey. And then what I like about serial fiction is that you can start it and then end it. Like, you can get it started and then float it to see how it works. And then if you like it, you can keep going. So yeah, I mean, that's what I used to do with short stories. I started every novel I've written, I started with a short story. In fact, the first novel I took 25 short stories that I really loved. This was a weird thing. I did this 8 years ago. I took 25 short stories that I really loved. I don't think I've ever talked about this on the podcast. I put them all into a short story collection called Be More Stories. And then at the end of the short story collection, I had a link to a Survey Monkey poll. And in the link of the Survey Monkey poll, I had like 5 questions. The first question was like, which story was your favorite? Which story did you skip? The second question was like, which story did you skip? The third question was like, what did you enjoy most about the writing in this book? And then the fourth question was like, I listed out all the stories and I was like, check the ones that you would read a full book of. And so people went through and like, I got like, for a first time writer, it was bad. I got like 60 responses back. Cool. So I was like, oh, look at that. I got 60 responses back and they all, like 45 of them checked the same story. So it's like, okay, really? So that's my first book. That was my first book. My first real book. I wrote a book in anger first, but that was my first real book. Okay. So if we have reconciled on the top of our emotional flow chart, right? And then we've got vengeful rage.
Bloodthirsty rage.
Bloodthirsty rage. On the bottom. The reason I'm doing this with you is because you've got a flow problem.
Okay.
Specifically in chapter 2. You're losing the stream in chapter 2. And so
let me tell you this, because that is the exact place that my sorority sister stopped reading. Yeah. She was like, she got to chapter 2. She's like, I can't read that. Yeah. I couldn't finish it.
So chapter 1, and I don't need to show, we can scroll through that later. So if we're laying out the beats of your story on the bottom, we'll do beats in orange. We've got contemplating murder, which is how you start. And really like working herself into a rage, right? Like you have this starting place where she's like working herself into this rage. Then you've got phone call with Melody. Then you've got as like beat 2, and that's kind of the end of chapter 1. And then in chapter 2, you have more contemplating murder and working yourself into a rage. And that's most of chapter 2. And then in chapter 3, we move into going to find jerk face. And then we have battle with troll. Right. We'll just
my cousin did tell me that the battle with the troll she felt was sort of epic, and she had to keep reading that. She loved that.
Yeah, the battle with the troll is great. You're losing it. This is where and you can see that like the beat here is really well defined. And the beat here is really well defined. Here, we're kind of cycling back. You can feel yourself kind of starting over, right? And then the beat here is really well defined, and the beat here is really well defined. So the question is like, what can we put here that's going to create the right emotional flow? So let's talk first about how your character feels. Celine, am I getting that right? Yeah.
Celine Badru.
So Celine, let's talk about how Celine feels. So Celine starts off in bloodthirsty rage contemplation world. How do you think Celine feels during the call with Melody?
So I made her more irritated and aggravated with Melody.
Is that closer to reconciliation or closer or still in bloodthirsty rage?
It might have been a little closer to reconciliation, or at least contemplating if reconciliation was possible.
Yeah. So you're coming up a little bit and then you come back down because we're just repeating the same beat. Going to see Jerkface, right? And battle with the troll. So, and you know, I'm going to do a different, let's add a different graph here because this one is helpful, but not completely helpful because it's just binary. So let's do what we need for your story is a 4-parter. So if we do reconcile and rage on the top, we're going to keep our beats here across the side, right? So we're still plotting out our beats. And then we do, sorry, I have to erase my dots. And then we do, there we go. Bloodthirsty rage. And then on the sides, and actually I'm going to do something different with these. And then on the sides, we do exciting. And we do contemplative. Because those are kind of the two beats you're hitting in the piece, right? Like you've got the exciting action and then the contemplative thought patterns. So battle with the troll, right? Super exciting, super bloodthirsty. Going to see Jerkface, building up exciting, building up bloodthirsty. And I might actually bring this one up a little bit because she stops focusing on Jerkface and she starts focusing on like, oh my gosh, I gotta beat this troll. So right, so we're kind of in between there. Contemplating working with rage 2, this is the second one, right? We come back over here to like contemplative, very bloodthirsty, but more contemplative. Phone call with Melody, we're moving less bloodthirsty and more contemplative. And then the first contemplative, we're back right here where we are, right? So you can see that these two kind of go together. Just imagine them on top of each other. So if we're to map your, like the roadmap of your character's journey, she's starting here and then she's coming up here and then we're coming right back down here. And then we're moving, going to Jerkface and then battle with troll. So you can see why this feels like a repeat, right? It's like you were like, hey, let's go on a road trip. And we're like, where are we going? And you're like, well, we're going to drive from home to Atlanta and then to back home. And then we're going to go to North Carolina.
Gotcha.
It's like, well, let's make that 2 trips or like we like go. So we just need to fix the flow for the reader.
Okay.
And you can see up front that you've got a lot of contemplation up front and a lot of like there's not a lot of excitement up front, if that makes sense. So now that you've seen this, how do you want your reader to feel? How do you want your lead character to feel? Now that I've talked to you about how it works, how would you want this graph to go?
I feel like we need to drop out. So it sounds like we need to drop out chapter 2, but I feel like, okay, so I'm trying to go back when I was working with it. So I feel like I was trying to get her. So I feel like I was trying to help her to deal with her acceptance of her grief and the experience that she had with her brother. So I may have even been trying to find ways to drop in the backstory.
Yes, that's exactly what you're doing. Yeah. So let's look at the piece itself, and you can see that structurally. Like when I first looked at it, I was like, oh, we've got a paragraph. I pulled this up here. It's actually like 3 paragraphs down. Paragraph, all of backstory, and then finally somebody speaks. And then we're doing more backstory. You're bringing her thoughts in, which is really creative and a good way to make it more engaging than just dropping backstory. But I can tell that you're world building. And the conversation with Melody doesn't actually start in the original until right here, all the way on the bottom of page 3 is where we're starting our first conversation. So all the backstory is great, right? Like you have a really great world build, but I think this happens a lot, especially when we're writing fantasy, where we start putting the backstory, we start dumping information because we're world building and we need to dump it. But we gotta, like, the thing that, you know, we always need to keep in mind is that outside of hardcore fantasy readers, right? Like let's take our like Tolkien nuts who like obsess over learning Elvish. Let's take them and put them over there. Most readers are not engaged by the backstory. In fact, a lot of times if you're like, a movie is a great way to get a sample of this. When somebody starts voicing over in a movie, people go up to get popcorn.
They do.
That's
right?
Like, I'll be back, because we want to be in the present, right? Like we want to be in the moment. So another way to arrange this, like let's talk about this. Well, look at red as our old path, right? What if we got rid of chapter 1 of this opening piece here about contemplating rage? We start just with the conversation with Melody. So you start right away. Maybe you give her like one sentence here. Your opening paragraph is great. So maybe we keep that opening paragraph. I follow my brother's murder today. I, again, changed it around because I can't help myself. When I like something, I have to play with it. I follow my brother's murder today. My anger and magic boil churning inside to let me be free. And I almost lost it and I killed him twice. Right? Like that's a hook. That's a hook.
So you're saying drop all of this.
I'm saying keep this. And then I'm saying, let's get to the phone call with Melody
faster,
as quickly as we can. Right? Because I don't need to know this yet. We can talk about the Fey Council of Light and Dark later. Right? I don't need to know that she feels misunderstood. Right? This is a nice one. I inadvertently rubbed the counterclockwise spiral on my arm, the apex of the dark magic. It flared, screaming at me, tempting me to lose my inhibitions. I like this because it lets me know that I'm in a fantasy novel. Right? I need to know. This sentence doesn't let me know I'm in a fantasy novel. This could be like the TV show You, right? Like she could be like about to lock somebody in the basement. So I need to know that I'm in a fantasy novel. So that's like, this line is important. I need to know where she is. Right now, you have a voice coming from the void. Right? Like there's just a like.
So I was definitely struggling with the celestial realm because, and that's what my sorority sister kept saying. She was like, I felt like the human stuff was dropping in, but where is she? And I feel like that settled in, but it took a minute to understand like this world.
It takes a minute. So where is she?
She's in the celestial realm.
What is that?
So the celestial realm is a pyramid world where they're at the apex of magical balance. Okay.
What does it look like to her?
So it really is. The landscape is a pyramid, and it has these different. On one side of the pyramid would be what I call the full breeds, and on the other side of the pyramid would be what I call the half breeds. And then there's a forest that's right in the middle of that.
Okay.
That's the place where magical balance is.
So she's sitting on the half-breed side of the forest.
Yes.
Okay. Where on the half-breed side of the forest is she sitting?
And so she is dealing with the wood sprite. So they're right on the tip, the very edge. She's right here.
So like, think less about a map and think more about like what is tangibly around her at the moment. Is she like sitting in a tree? Is she like in a house, in a chair? Like, where is she in this opening?
Yeah, so I was trying to deal with that. And so you caught me because I was trying to hide that.
I know you were. I'm just going to keep asking you questions until you tell me what I want to know.
When I was writing it, I literally was hiding it. So I knew that Melody lived in a tree house, but in earnest, I didn't really know where Celine lived. I think she lived, I thought she could live in an apartment originally, but then, okay, so an apartment falls into the celestial realm, that could be dangerous, right? So then, because these human things are falling into this world, and that means there's an incredible imbalance,
Gotcha.
So then I'm thinking, her and her brother had to have lived somewhere nice on the half-breed side, but it's not, Celine would not live in a treehouse. And so that's why I was struggling with that, because I couldn't figure out where she really lived.
Okay. So let's talk about how you've got a very complex world going on, which is beautiful and perfect for this genre. For this short story, you have to decide what's important to the story. The pyramid, the forest in the middle, things falling from the sky, from the human realm into this celestial realm. Every aspect of that you want us to know, you can't tell us, you have to show us.
Right.
So
I'm gonna write myself a note. I need to decide on where she really
we got to know where she is.
Okay.
And if you want to introduce that things are falling from the human realm into the celestial realm, we need to see something fall and crash to the ground.
Gotcha.
Right. And she needs to comment on it. We can't just see it and fall and crash to the ground. We have to hear how she feels about it. And notice I said hear how she feels about it. She needs to comment. Right? Like, son of a bitch, another stupid mailbox. How many mailboxes do those humans need?
I feel like there was a place where I talked about her trinkets or something.
Yeah. But you're telling me.
Yeah, I didn't see it.
I need to see it.
I got it.
And again, this is part of that, like, what's important for the short story, right? The core of your story, if we're looking at the beats of your story, this is a woman who's been following a man all day, who's going to kill this man at the end of the story. That's the premise you set up. You have this very complex world. Do you need it for this story? Right? For if you decide to expand this story, you're going to need it. But for this story, do we need it? Maybe, but it has to service this story.
Gotcha.
Right? So let me just make a suggestion. So as we talk about where she is and what's going on, there's a different way to do this, right? That'll give you the kind of emotional flow for this opening that you want. Because what I saw you want is you want her to work herself into a bloodthirsty rage, go to find Jerkface, and then be encountered with this battle with this troll. That's what you...
I mean, in the end, so the last chapter is literally, I want her to torture him.
Nice. I love
it. He needs to be hit in the head with a hammer.
So there's a battle with the troll. What happens after the battle with the troll?
So after the battle with the troll, she finally does hunt him down, and they have their big climax, and she takes her sharpened hammer and bashes him with it. And she's gotten herself so bloodthirsty in the end that that Melody and the brother must come to help her to reconcile and come back into who she really is.
Gotcha. So I'm going to change this now that I know where you're going, because you're not actually getting to any reconcile in this story, because that's your next story.
Okay.
That's what you just, right? That's what you told me. You're not getting to
Yeah.
any reconcile in this story.
Well,
So this,
she does stop killing him. She chooses not to kill him.
okay, so she just beats him a little bit.
No, she really tortures him really bad.
Okay, yeah, no, you don't get, that's not. Do we see Melody talk her down,
Melody tries.
but doesn't succeed?
No, the brother gets through to her. I wanted it to, so that is one thing.
Does the brother appear in this story, or is that a different story?
He appears as a ghost.
Okay. So in the end, it doesn't end with her killing Jerkface. It ends with brother talking her down.
Yes.
Okay. So what you have here is a man in the hole story, right? So we want to start here. We then want to go here. We then want to go here. We then want to go here. Right? We then want to come here, and then here, and then here. Right?
And that's at the very end, she becomes Melody's partner.
Okay. So this is where we want to go, right? It's a man in the hole story. Man falls in a hole, with help, climbs out of hole. This is your story, right? Yes. So you can see now why in this original dotted line, you were losing the thread a little bit. So what we need in your opening card is her contemplating next steps. And it needs to be like 3 paragraphs. That's all you get. And you need to tell me exactly where she is. She's in her kitchen, right? She's got all of her weapons laid out on the table. Something falls. If you want to bring that aspect in, something falls from the sky and it's like a frying pan outside. And she mumbles about like how nothing useful ever falls. From like, I could really use a gun right now, right? Like how nothing useful ever falls from the sky. Phone rings and it's Melody. And now we're into the conversation with Melody. Right? And we've got Melody trying to bring her up and she has a moment of contemplation. Now, after Melody has brought her up, you can then have your moment of contemplation of murder. And then this needs to build to her finally deciding, I'm just going to go. And then then we can have the battle with the troll where she's hunting him down. And then she starts to kill Jerkface. But when she's starting to kill Jerkface, she needs to feel bad about it. And then her brother can appear to talk her down. And now we've got that nice man in the hole arc that sets her up for like redemption. Okay, so this is the bigger issue with your plot. So we can talk about how you need to change chapter 2 in a second, because chapter 2 needs, even in this new flow, chapter 2 needs a little bit of work. But so let's go to the actual piece now. So here in the opening, again, your opening sentence is fantastic. Fabulous hook, pulls me right in. We can hear her brother's like, this you can keep, her like touching her arm. We could hear this, but I almost want something in here that tells me where she is. Right. And you got to get that first person. Like I sit at the stool at my kitchen table with, my favorite axes lined up in front of me, or my favorite hammers lined up in front of me, deciding which one I'm going to use to club his skull. Right. I'll make him pay. Outside the window, a frying pan falls from the human realm to the celestial, banging on my sidewalk.
Gotcha.
Why can't they ever give me anything useful like a gun? Right. Like, and then we can get into this, like, then I rub inadvertently this counterclockwise circle, and then she can hear his voice, right? Like, so can you feel how that bringing that like present reality into it connects us immediately to it and makes it real for us. And you're still getting that backstory in, right? Like, but you're getting it in as it relates to what's happening in the world around her presently.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So let's talk about internal monologue.
I did that quite a bit in this one.
And I love it. The internal monologue is actually great. I don't want you to kill it. I just want to talk about what you want from it. So you have two types of internal monologue going on, because she's first person narrator. So we have this: I followed my brother's murderer today. My anger boiled, churning inside to be free, and I almost killed him twice. That is internal monologue, right? Like, I mean, she's talking to us. And then every once in a while, you do something like this: I'd make him pay. What is the difference in this and this to you?
So, yeah, I guess, I don't know. I was pantsing. It's early morning, you know.
Oh, I think it's great.
Going with it, man.
I love
hear
it.
You, right?
Yeah,
so
but
it really might not be italicized.
Well, so as a reader, I'm like, how am I supposed to read that? Like, what is special about this? Right? Like, so here's another one. The previous owner must have loved the character on this item with his black suit, bat wings, that stare, and now so did I. If looks could kill, if I could kill. Right? I love that this is set apart in its own line, because it gives me kind of like a step toward vocalization. So it gives me it's a step more engaging than if it were just the like narrative. It is a step closer, but the italics are confusing it, because the italics are like, am I supposed to, because the question as a reader, I'm like, am I supposed to like visualize that differently? Like, is that then this up here? So I would say, let's just take the italics out of this, right? And you can see that, like, when we take the italics out, you have the same pacing effect, right? What you're trying to get here when you punch it down a line like that is, as a reader, you're making me pause before I read it, right? The previous owner must have loved the character on this item with his black suit, bat wings, that stare, and now so did I. If looks could kill, if I could kill, right? So that, like, you heard just in my reading the beat that I took mentally, because you spaced down a line. My phone buzzed. Another human trinket with especially happy-go-lucky ring. But like, you can hear as I'm reading it that I'm like taking that breath there to get to the next line. So it's a nice effect, right? Like dropping it into the line, ignoring kind of like conventional paragraphing to give us the like, hey, here's the pacing of her internal monologue is great, but putting it in italics is actually throwing it off. So we need to take it out of italics so that the reader knows that this is just more of her internal monologue going on. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So I think if you'll do that, the other option would be, some writers I've worked with do this weird, it's not weird, it's this very meta thing where the first person POV describes that they are thinking about something. Those like, if looks could kill, like they'll put it in quotes, if looks could kill, if I could kill, I thought. When you do that, like the times I've seen writers do that, what they're doing is they're it's as if the character, the narrator is in the future talking about what happened. Yours is more present. She's not talking about what happened. It's happening now. I followed my brother's murderer today. My anger and magic boiled, and I almost killed him twice. I'd make him pay. I inadvertently rubbed the counter, right? Like, she's doing this right now. I inadvertently rubbed the counterclockwise on my arm. It flared. She's not like telling me, like, 5 weeks ago, I couldn't believe that this thing went down, right? Like it's, you know, let me tell you the whole story. It's happening, like she's unfolding this as we're talking to her, which is great because it makes her an unreliable narrator, right?
Yeah.
Like we're stuck into her world and like her perspective of everything. And she may or may not be telling us the truth, right? Like because it's all happening at the moment. So that's a nice, and it creates a nice like unfolding to the story. So I actually wouldn't lose that. But if you wanted to have these inner thoughts set out differently, you'd have to rewrite so that it feels more like somebody telling us about something that already happened.
Gotcha.
But again, I like this better, so I wouldn't do that. But yeah, but it's your piece, your call. Okay, so we talked about any questions about first person POV?
No.
Great. I'm gonna get so many notes about Jeff hates italics.
I'm
trying to help. Just trying to help. Okay. So we've talked about keeping it present. So I have to go through my list and make sure I hit everything. We've talked about first person POV. What's another big thing we can talk about before we get to the little things? Okay. So another thing you're doing is, especially in conversations, you get excited. I can tell as a writer, you get excited about the emotions and you want to hang out in them, but you lose the call and response. Do you know what I mean about call and response? The like one character speaks, the other character has to respond. Even if that response is silence, you have to tell us that they're responding with silence.
Okay.
Otherwise, it just sounds like Melody's just talking over top of everyone all the time. So we have to know that she's intentionally not responding, that Celine isn't responding. So right here is a place where you start to lose it. Celine, Melody shot me with her lucky hearts and flowers enchantment through the phone. No, wait, did I take that out? I copied that somewhere else. This isn't the piece. Here's where I wanted to talk about it. There we go. I just added, I didn't do anything, okay? And then, but see, here's where this like back and forth of her internal and external is going to work really great. This is something I'm going to talk about. I forgot. Because something that's wonderful when you're doing that first person present, like things are unfolding as they go, is she can say one thing and think another. Yeah, which is like, I didn't do anything, okay? But I should have. Right. Like, and as the reader, we know like, oh, that's her internal thought. And we get like, it makes it actually more intimate for us to be
subtext.
Like, yeah, I'm getting both sides. So she says, she sounded like she was concerned. You're not thinking of suicide, are you? And then you had skipped down to her voice was melodious in tone and she was trying to listen to my mood. I mean, that could really be painful for everyone involved. Right. So we've got two melodies in a row here. And we haven't heard her back. So we need her to either say something, or we need her to be like, I rubbed the thing on my arm, or we need her to be like, I played with the hammer on the table. Right. Like we need to hear her response to murder suicide. Another place you do it, you lose it without, but there's a couple places where I was like, oh, this is a great example of it. Let's get to 12. Here we go. This is, now we've got this like bigger scene going on where she's actually stalking the dude. I huffed, my stomach growled. I hadn't eaten in 2 days. Ian's death, I hadn't wanted to eat. The grief had been unlivable. Let's go get some chow, Melody began floating and dancing around in her leafy fairy tutu, all of her golden magic revealing her secret location. Then she started singing, songing in her sentences. Big Bob's Drunken Gnome Burgers, good for your belly, perfect for jelly, perfect for you, jelly, perfect, perfect. Melody danced, turned and twisted. Your favorite really greasy burger place, right? So we've got two utterances of Melody. You see this as the author as another utterance, or you wouldn't have given it its own paragraph. We have to have a response, right? Two utterances of Melody have to have a response. Then Melody can come back, and now you've got to know. I rubbed my eyes. Or these two pieces have to go in the same paragraph. Because when you space down that paragraph, you're telling the reader a new person is talking. So we need a if you're going to space down, we need a response. Does that make sense? And I would recommend not putting all of this in one paragraph. I would recommend getting your character more vocal at a minimum with body language. Right? Like, so if you don't want her talking, let her speak with her body language and like push back with her body language. Does that make sense? Okay. How do you feel about that?
I think that's probably right.
Okay.
Yeah, because I feel like she's looking at Melody like, will you stop it?
Yeah. And you gotta tell us that. Because what's happening here is that Melody's going like not so crazy. And we are having our reader response to Melody, but we don't know if that response is right or not. Right? Because as the reader, we really want to line up with the hero. We want to be on the same page with the hero. We want to like connect with the hero. So when we don't know how the hero or how the vehicle character in here, like the character that's carrying the emotional journey, when we don't know how the vehicle character here is feeling, we start to get uneasy.
Yeah. Well, my cousin specifically said that she felt that Melody wasn't a caring person. And so from what you just said right here, that makes a lot of sense, because it's like Melody just going on, and it's obvious that she doesn't understand. Does she not care? Does she not know? So I see what you're saying.
And so if you can take these moments and have her say something like, will you just go away? And then have her think, even though I appreciate you trying. Right? Like that will connect us to Melody. That'll make us go like, okay, a Melody's obnoxious and we want Melody to go away, but we understand that Melody's trying. Right? Like if you can give us that in this kind of moment, when the vehicle tells us like, okay, this person, you and me in the car together, we know that this person, this side character is annoying, but you got to know that she's got a good heart. Right? If the vehicle character tells us that, we're like, okay, I hate Melody, but she also has a good heart. Right? Like we'll start following that vehicle where they go. So tossing that in here will help us, like making sure you always have this call and response isn't just about keeping the energy going, right? Because like the back and forth keeps the energy going. It's not just about keeping the energy going. It's also about letting the reader understand how they're supposed to see the world around them. And right? Like I ask you, like, what's your character doing here? And you can immediately tell me. She's like, Melody, will you just go away?
Yeah.
Like, how you want the reader to feel, but you have to bring us along, because we can't decipher it, right? Like we can't just like in tune how that is. We will in tune once we see your vehicle like respond to it a little bit. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's call and response. Since we read it, let's talk about suicide for a second.
Yeah, I saw you. I read that. You didn't like that part.
I just take it out. And it's not that I don't like it. I think the murder suicide is really great, but it's very heavy.
It is.
And you're doing a lot in this story already. I don't know that you need it. Murder is
I was trying to show that she was really in a very dark place.
Yeah,
and she was missing so she's suffered these incredible deaths, and so she's getting to that point where she's just willing to kill everybody and kill herself.
Yeah, and I think it's super real, right? Like I think it's very authentic. I think if this were a novel, if you had 120,000 words, Melody could have a conversation with her on the way to meeting Jerkface about suicide. But you've got, I think the whole piece is 20,000 words. You don't have time. to
Yeah,
do.
so I feel like it's maybe even 11,000 words.
It is,
And
I think you're right, because this is half of it and this is 42.
Mhm.
So I think you're at like 9,000 words. You don't have
Yes.
time to deal with suicide. You
Mhm.
could blow it out and add a conversation, but then if you do that, we're also changing this, right? Because if you put
Mhm.
convo about suicide,
Mhm.
like where does that go? Right? Like, does that go here? Because to really
Mhm.
have that, you're going to have to come way contemplative,
Mhm.
right? And you're going to have to go closer to reconcile. So
Mhm.
the place that really is going to fit is down here with the brother, so that you can take the journey and then flip back.
And she literally at the end is not suicidal.
Yeah, but
She's homicidal, but
yeah. So
right.
but you can see how this feels, just like feeling the emotional flow of the piece. This is a weird, you're like, where do I put it?
Put it.
If you come to this place of like, where do I put it? Just don't.
Yeah.
Just take it out, right? Because it's not, it becomes things like that, topics that are that heavy and that big and that really have to be dealt with, they become the piece. Right? Like now this is not just about murder, it's about grief and suicide.
Yeah, no, I think it's really about her murdering. I
Yeah.
think
Oh,
it's
this is totally
more
about murder.
it's about avenging.
Yeah. Yeah. It's about stabbing. And
Yes.
so you have a line in here, I'm not going to find it, but you have a line in here where Melody says, like, if you do that, there's no way you get away with it. You could die. That brings the weight of suicide that you're looking for without her calling it a murder suicide. So
Gotcha.
I would keep that and just lose the phrasing about suicide, because you don't want to spend the time to deal with it. Does that make sense? Okay. Any questions about what we've talked about so far?
No, I'm good.
Okay. So we've talked a lot about chapter 1. Oh, one more thing. This is just a little side note, but this is just when we're talking, this is technical stuff about dialogue. Melody's voice. You're using ellipses to like get her like stumbling. Readers tend to read ellipses as trailing off pauses. So if we're reading this with the ellipses, I mean, killing certain fairy creatures could cause a shift in the fate of the celestial forest that could destroy the entire magical world. And I'm still an agent of magical balance, and I have to do something like maybe arrest you and maybe hold you to maintain the entire, so you can feel how I'm like stretching that, because we tend to read ellipses as this like trailing off into reflective thought. So everywhere you've got an ellipses for Melody, put a comma, and it'll read. Now it's going to feel like insane to you as a writer, because you're going to be like, this is a paragraph of one long run-on sentence.
It is, and that's what I kept trying. I was trying to like not do that.
Yeah, I can see you like trying to fix the grammar. Like, how can I make this work? You're not. The grammar's not going to work, right? Like, because she's not speaking in full sentences. You just got to let it go, right? Like, I mean, killing certain fairy creatures could shift from the celestial forest that could destroy the entire magical world. And I'm still an agent of the magical balance. And I'd have to do something like maybe arrest you and maybe hold you to maintain the entire cosmos ballast thing. So, I don't want to have to do that. So please tell me you didn't murder him, right? Like that's that, like you can feel the pacing you're looking for there of her like crazy run-on sentence just like pouring out of her, which is what I think you wanted.
Yes.
Yeah. So no, I would stop using those ellipses because I don't think they're helping you. This is great. The dashes are great. I would keep her voice a combination of commas and dashes.
Commas and dashes. Okay.
Yeah. Dashes are going to happen when she's like giving you these asides. Right. And this phrasing right here, this is great. I would use that whenever she's like rambling. I try to work those in there.
And she's a rambler. So both of them hated that. It was like she's rambling and stuttering.
And it's okay as long as your vehicle character comments on it in a compassionate way.
Gotcha.
Right? Like, yeah, we are allowed to like obnoxious characters if other characters like the obnoxious
Like
character.
them.
Yeah, but we need somebody else to like her.
So I did have one quick question.
Yeah.
So there was some cursing in here, and I put it in, and I was struggling with if there should be cursing or not, because they are in the celestial realm, but then they also have these human items falling. So it is within the personal realm of that.
I mean, it's your celestial realm. You can do it whatever you want.
I guess. Okay. I just didn't know if it did it.
The question about cursing is more about who is this for? Right? If this is for kids under the age of 16,
no, you
shouldn't be cursing. Right? And I like to think of it as like movie ratings, even though we completely ignore those. Right? Like, you know, under the age of 16, you get maybe one F-bomb the whole book. Right? Like, and it better matter, and you better have a reason for it. So everything else pushes you over that R rating, which is, I think, is actually over 17. Then the second question is, there's a lot of, I'm gonna get in trouble. There's a lot of Christian fantasy readers.
There are, yeah, this is true. Who really have a problem with it.
Those Southern Christian fantasy readers, they do not like your F-bombs in their books.
Hey, what you doing?
So if you want that audience, keep that cussing out of there. They really like creative cussing, right? They like you to make up curse words that aren't real curse words.
And that's what I was thinking too. I was like, well, I was kind of struggling with, should I make up some curse words that suits the celestial realm?
They like that.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll make myself a note to consider that.
Yeah.
Create curse words.
Yeah. Those readers tend to not like anything that verges into erotica. They seem to be okay with murder.
But I feel like no Christian fantasy readers are going to be reading my bloodthirsty, because I do gratuitous violence.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. They tend to be okay with gratuitous violence.
Oh, Lord.
It's a really weird thing. Yeah, they're okay with the gratuitous violence, not with the erotica, and not with the bad language. Yeah. Okay. But while your troll bashes in someone's head and the brains splatter all over his warhammer, if he says frick-a-frack, they're okay with it. Okay. Yeah, you're gonna give me trouble. You gotta leave me out talking about that. All right, so we talked about, okay, so let's talk about your opening for chapter 2. We've talked about chapter 1, right? We need an active opening for chapter 1. We need to know where she is. She's gonna have this phone call with Melody. When Melody threatens to come over, we need Celine to look out her window and see the treehouse. Right? We need to know, like, it's right. She's right there. Right? Like, I looked out my window and saw the treehouse and realized I only had moments before she actually got here. Right? Gotcha. So we need to know spatial awareness and proximity of where everybody is. And part of that is, like, you know, Alicia, when I'm editing my own stuff, I have this, I actually dropped a piece today. Or yesterday. What's today? Today's Thursday. It was 2 days ago. I dropped a piece in the Dialogue Doctor Slack that for the writing prompt. The writing prompt this week was about spatial awareness. And I dropped a piece in there about spatial awareness because when I was writing it, I was struggling. I have 3 characters. They're moving around a room a lot. They're in different places. They keep it. There's actually 2 characters are kind of on a journey together, and they keep like bumping into people. And I really struggled with, like, oh, I've got to track where they are. Like, I have to track, like, and they're in a car for a while, and I want to just be going back and forth with dialogue, but I need to track that, like, he's rolling the window down, he's leaning up against the window, he's like doing these things so that my reader can visualize the scene. Right? We want to empower the reader to visualize the scene. And your opening is missing that visualization. And then when Melody threatens to come, I think it's on page 7. When she threatens to, yeah, here we go. Now I really was smiling. I love you, I said in a mocking, chipper tone. I'll come back and check on you in 2 shapes of the leprechauns. Fast luck break, even if I have to trip all the way over there, Melody said clumsily. Who would have guessed flying half leprechaun could be so uncoordinated? Then Melody took a deep breath and was sadder. Again, like, this is an okay response, but it would be nice if she actually said something. Whenever, she does. Whenever, so yeah, we need this. Sorry, I should have made this edit for you. We need this here. Whatever I said angrily and frustrated. We need that before Melody sighs. Then Melody took a deep breath and sadder. We both hung up, and I need her to say, like, don't come. And I need Melody to be like, don't make me. Right. And then please don't do anything crazy. Right. Like, but here you've mentioned up here that she's in this treehouse, and then she's like, I'm coming over. Because I don't know where the treehouse is. I don't know how long that's going to take. I don't know if she's really coming over. Right. Like, I was like really confused. I was like, does Melody live in a treehouse in the backyard? Like, that was kind of my like, where is this Melody?
Where is she at?
So I just need more spatial awareness about like how far away the treehouse is, where she's coming from, like all that kind of stuff. Then the key is you can't write a paragraph that tells me like the world is a pyramid and there's a forest in the middle, and you have to artfully work it into conversation, right? Like, I promise not to get caught, I said defensively, swirling. Yeah, puffin stuff wasn't what I needed at the moment. I hurled my darkness into the treehouse where her clockwise magic probably came from. So this was the only mention you gave me of the treehouse. You can see how like I'm like, wait, she hurled her darkness to the treehouse. Did she like? So I'm visualizing she like looked out the window, was like, to the backyard. The world you're describing for me is like, no, there's this huge forest and like, yeah. So you got to lay that out for me, but you can't just add it to this paragraph. You have to start building that knowledge up here. And so that when Melody threatens to come over, well, that's weird. When Melody threatens to come over, I know that it's weird. Not everything disappeared. How weird is that? That's really strange.
Is it farther down?
No, it's all a white screen. Everything's gone. I'm gonna close it and reopen it. That's weird. But do you see what I'm saying about like that, like need to know where everything is? So again, in the start of your second chapter on page 8, there we go. Now we're back. On page 8, here we're going to keep her ramping herself up, right? Because now that we've rearranged the opening, this is her ramping herself up. Here will be the first time we're kind of seeing it and her like building into the rage. So it's great. Right now, the way you have it though is it's very like ethereal, meaning that like it's not grounded in any kind of tangible presence in the world. So I kept wrecking my brain, but I wanted him to suffer like he'd made me hurt. He took away my only sibling, the last person in the world who made sure I'd survived after our mother died. The old wound opened. I couldn't accept that my mother is gone. She'd been gone for so long. Ian looked at her. I couldn't believe he was dead. I'm just skimming down a little bit. When they found her body, Ian came to, he collected, he raised and made sure everything was survived. No place for shame, Queenie, he would say. His voice was always smooth. When Ian, so you see now, I'm a half page in. I have no idea where she is. I have no idea what she's doing. I've got no visualization of what's going on. She's just like speaking into a black void, which it's well written, and you're giving me a lot of good backstory, but I don't have anything to hold on to. Right? Like I need a scene to see. I need something to live in right now, as opposed to just the black void. My gut chased on itself, gone fail. I didn't know it would be the last time I see him, I couldn't accept that he was gone, that my mother was gone. I cried inside. See, even here, we're even crying in the black void. We're not even physically crying in the real world. And I felt the intense, my vision turned blood on blood. I grabbed my weapons. So now for a page in, I know that she has weapons, but I don't know where she's grabbing them from. I don't know, like, I got to know this stuff. So
you're saying at the top of chapter 2, I need to add in the spatial awareness?
Consider me in the world, right?
Okay.
I kept racking my brain. I wanted him to suffer like he'd made me hurt, right? I picked up a hammer and I picked up a hammer off my kitchen table and felt the weight of it. This one's too light to actually do any damage. He took my only sibling, the last person in the world who survived after our mother died. I picked up another hammer and admired, the steely goal. I imagined his blood like splattering across the handle. I decided that I would keep it there if I use this one, right? The old wound opened. I couldn't believe she was dead, right? Now, I would actually do something here. You have a conversation here. So after you ground us in where she is and what she's physically doing while she's having all these thoughts, and this is a hard thing to do when you have a character that's alone, right? So your first 2 chapters, your character is alone in a room, which is why we have this problem of like she has to be interacting with stuff. If Melody was in the room with her, we wouldn't need this, right? Like, but she's alone in a room, so we have to have her interacting with these things. So when I come down here, you have this, so that's the first thing I would do with chapter 2. The second thing I'd do with chapter 2 is I would jump into a memory, but I would show it to us. So you've got this great moment here. Ian and the council and the bureau believed we both had potential to turn evil. He and I had the same mother, but different fathers. Furious, forbidden, Reaper. I'd never let my father, maybe he was dead. I only knew he was a special type of Reaper, a necromancer. So we've got this like backstory paragraph here. And we're living in this moment where she's like mourning her mother and mourning her brother, right? Instead of this paragraph, what I would recommend is something like, once I'd finished him, I could use my hybrid magic to bring him back from the dead and control his body, mind, and soul forever. I remembered my brother standing in this very kitchen. You had that great description of him in here somewhere that I was like, this is a great description, but it doesn't fit here. Here it is. His golden brown skin and long dreadlocks, making him look regal and royal as he always had, right? But what about the prophecy he had said? And talk to us like she's telling you the memory that she hears. What about the prophecy he had said, right? Like, or like, don't cut yourself with that blade, sis. Like, that's the one I used. I went back to the knives. Like, don't cut yourself with that blade, sis. Why not? It's my blade, I had replied. Right. But if you start using that past tense language, you're communicating this, that like she's remembering something, but instead of telling us the scene, we get to feel and see the scene. So using a memory here that she relives and that she like literally lives line by line, you can do this paragraph in a couple exchanges in an artful way. Using that past tense language communicates that it's not happening, and it'll make it feel more real to the reader. Because right now, this is interesting information, but that's what it is. It's interesting information. I'm not feeling it. But you want me to feel it, so I have to live that scene. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
So if you ground her in the world in a tangible way, and she's having these back thoughts, and then you jump into a memory where we actually meet her brother and we suddenly care about her brother. Because at the moment, I haven't really heard her brother's voice. So I don't actually care about her brother. When we got to her like chasing down the guy, I'm like, I don't care. So Like, this is interesting that she wants to kill this guy, but I'm not feeling her pain. Right. So show me her brother, introduce me to her brother. Let me see her brother in a memory that she's having. And then I'll join her in her
anger,
pain for him and her anger for him. Right. Because then after you show me that, you can this will make sense. My emotions were raw. Death magic had control. I snarled. Right. Like if you come out of the memory, she's going to come to this place where now she's like fuming. Because she's had a moment remembering this loved one that cared for her and was compassionate. It was die. Tony was my plaything. I knew, right, like this would all be great coming out of that memory. We have a second problem with chapter 2, and that's where you end it. I wrenched the hammers from toes, shoved it. He was going to die and suffer tonight. This is a good place to end chapter 2 if you wanted to end it here. You keep it going so that we're outside Tony's thing. She's hunting him down. Melody finally shows up and is like in the way, right? There's this like back and forth. I'll come back to this note in a second. And then you get to this, like, where did chapter 3 cut off? It hasn't cut off yet. Or did it already? No, here's where you ended it. So she says, like, what are you looking for? Melody always sounded like everything was childlike wonder. We aren't looking for anything. I said, I'm looking. And then you have the inner thought here. Oh, no, this isn't an inner thought. We aren't looking for anything. I'm looking for anything that proves Tony killed my brother on purpose. I didn't want to tell her my real reason. I was looking for a way to get past the big ass troll and dispose of Tony flat out. You hit chapter 3, and then you started chapter 3 with, okay, Melody said, I meant to tell you about the night Ian, right? Like, so this is a weird break. What were you going for with this break?
I think so. I was actually writing at 700 or either 5 to 750 words per scene. So I originally didn't have chapters.
Gotcha.
I was writing it in scenes.
You're doing it like episode style.
Yes.
Yeah. So the memory is going to add some to it. So I would either break your chapter 2 back up here before she leaves the house, because the memory is going to give you 100 to 200 words. So I'd either break it here, or I'd keep it going, make this a longer scene until we get a natural stop point in the conversation. Because the problem with where you're breaking it now is it's literally mid-conversation. And it's not mid-conversation. So like when you're writing episodes, you can stop mid-scene, but you have to know that when you pick up the next scene, because these are inevitably going to be, if you're publishing it like a serial, they're going to be published like on Monday and then on Tuesday. The top of Tuesday's scene, you have to have something that picks everybody back up from Monday.
So I think I want to go, I think my concept is going to be a 90-day serial, and that I'm going to release something every day for 90 days.
Yeah.
So I might actually need to, instead of have chapters, I might need to start doing the 5 to 700 word episodes.
Okay. So we want to end it on a strong
note.
But we also want to end it on a place where you're not going to have to recap the middle of a conversation.
Okay.
So like right here, I didn't want to tell her my reason. I was here to be the troll flat out. Oh, okay, Melody said, her body started slumping in midair. I meant to tell you about the night that Ian. So if I missed this day, I come into here, I'm like, I don't know what's happening.
Right.
Yeah. Especially if you're doing the Stephanie Bond style where you're taking everything down after 24 hours.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that.
I got to know what's going on, right? Okay. Like hers is written diary style, where every episode is a new day.
The entry.
And that's how she gets away with it, right? Because she ends it and then picks up the next day. You're not doing that. You're just going one long like journey, but you're clipping it every episode. So you got to make sure you're clipping it at a place where it makes sense to pick back up. So if we clip it down here, tough luck. I headed down toward Tony's location. No need for a sheath now. I'm sure his troll, Patrick Warhammer, knew I was coming. I'd have to take that big ass troll down. And I was okay with that. Nothing was going to stop me from killing Tony, not Patrick, even Melody's good intentions. I made a promise. I made Ian a promise, she yelled behind me. I have to keep it. I didn't care about Melody's promise to my murdered brother. Right. This is a strong break because like you're recapping what they just said. So people that read it believed it, remember it, but we're changing settings. So as we're changing settings, somebody who missed that day can pick right back up into where we were. Right. Like, so yeah, just think about as you're breaking these, where you're coming to a close and where you're opening back up. Does it make sense? Chapter 3 was definitely your strongest chapter.
That usually happens for me. It seems like I need the space. I seem to settle into concepts by chapter 3.
Well, and you're a really good action writer. So your action scenes are really strong. You get into the fight scene, and I can tell as a writer, you're just rolling.
I love fight scenes.
Yeah. So, and this is the last piece of advice I'm going to give you. And then you and I are going to talk again next week about the second half. But this is the last piece I'm going to give you. I need their voices. You lose their voices in the fight scene. You get so into the dance of them fighting with each other, they just stop talking. So like I just dropped in here, like, give us their vocalization, right? Like you've got melody.
No, here. Jeff, they just have to bash each other.
No, they have to, they can grunt, they can sneer, they can spit.
Okay.
They don't have to use words, but we need the, and so what it does is, so you like Kung Fu movies?
I do.
Yeah, I know this about you. Some Kung Fu movies, like some martial arts movies, are tough to watch because it's just two people on a screen and they're moving really fast.
Sometimes they talk really fast like this and then they go.
Yeah, that's weird. We're not talking. That's not what I'm talking about. That's not what I'm talking about.
Okay.
So they're just moving really fast and they're dancing all over the screen and you can't really tell what's happening. And you just kind of like watch it. You're like, huh, that's cool. And then you move on from it. And part of the reason that that kind of scene is difficult to connect with is because there's no emotional intonation in what's going on.
Right.
Right. Which is why the classic ones and the ones that we hold up as like great, right? Like the hero gets punched in the face, falls down on the ground, the camera zooms into his face, and he's like, and then like it goes back to the bigger scene, right? Because we need that moment of emotional connection with what's happening. So in literature, right, like when we're reading, we get that emotional connection through their vocalizations.
Gotcha.
So again, it doesn't have to be like, they don't have to be like spouting paragraphs to each other. That's it. I tap deep into my fury, rage, magic. I get when she says that's it. Oh, it's on. Right? Like that's what I need. No, Celeste screamed. She yelled, Patrick, stop. You could tell she's trying to discourage him from smashing me with the Reaper. Warhammer and I were engaged in a fist fight. The troll swung and I leapt out of the way, but he missed me and walloped Melody hard. She went crashing into the brick wall, blood from her lip. I touched the counter. Like, I need her vocalization there. How does she feel about that? Right?
She got mad.
Yeah, like, you know, you bastard, right? Like, I need something here, or if you're not going to cuss because of the Christian readers, you know, you son of a snake oil salesman. I need something here that's like that vocalization. I touched the counter card, my magic fully awakened. I was tired of being a victim. I was worn out from losing. I could tell. So now you're switching to him. I could tell my eyes were turning because my vision couldn't surge. I felt the rush of the Fury Reaper control, right? The troll swung at me. And it's giving me a yelp, right? Like, let him yell, right? The troll screamed as he swung at me, right? Like, just adding that word screamed as he swung at me helps me visualize what's happening here. Right, like, and that's what we want. We want those, like, in the fight scene, we need those moments of vocalization so that we can like live in that moment.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Okay, anything we didn't talk about you want to cover? That was a lot. We went for a long time. I kept you for a long time.
No, can you scroll down to the end with the troll fight scene. Oh yes, so this part, because you were saying something about, so Melody needs to be talking between the two of them.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah. She's got to, like, you've got a super talkative character. And then you've got two characters that are like embroiled in this moment. By adding Melody's voice in between what's happening, you're actually escalating the emotional tension of what's going on, right? And you get that naturally because you do it here at the front. Stop, she shrilled, her green afro curls full of blood, dirt, and grass. My fairy sister blew a quick breath of her golden magic and circled her and Tony, right? Burning frustration filled my soul. I need her response. Get out of my way, right? The assault was real. My emotions were out of control. I couldn't, and then I need her to say, like, I'm like, you can't do this. This isn't you, right? Because we're pushing toward that reconciliation. So we need Melody calling her, right? Like Melody is your, if she's the vehicle, Melody's your engine, pulling her toward the positive, right? Like driving her upwards. So we need Melody telling her who she's going to be, right? Don't do this. This isn't you. This isn't what your brother would want, right? My emotions were out of control. And then take this piece here, you know, I will go through you to get to him. Right. Melody can be like, you know, please don't. Right. Like, or please stop. Like, this isn't you. And if we start working their voices in here, this becomes a hyper emotional scene.
Oh, wow.
That your readers are going to love. Right. Like that your readers, but that you've beat out here, right? Like you've got the beats of this hyper emotional scene. I lunge forward with my matches ready, right? Then Melody's song smashed into me. Like, so you've already got the things happening that like are creating that emotional moment. But we need to feel the build up to the climax. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, so that was my last note there for you, is including those voices. And it's the same thing as with the Warhammer fight, right? Like including their vocalizations cues us into how each character feels, and when you cue us into how they feel, we kind of join the moment in a more intimate way, and the scene gains a lot of power. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to turn off the recording. We can talk about it next week.
Okay.